Mornings in the town of Kansas always seemed to arrive earlier than anywhere else, or at least, that was how Jenny felt. At 29, she had grown used to waking up while the sky was still drowsy, slipping into her worn-out green apron, and quietly stepping out of her tiny one-bedroom apartment on the third floor of an old building tucked behind the town's library. The morning breeze rustled through her hair, the scent of coffee from the corner bakery filled the air, and the hiss of the number 4 bus echoed down the street, all of it repeating, just like every other day for the past 3 years. Rosie's diner opened at 6 a.m., but Jenny always arrived half an hour earlier. She liked the moment before the day truly began, when the neon lights outside the windows still outshone the morning sun, and the only sound breaking the silence was the clink of spoons against porcelain cups. No one truly noticed Jenny, and Jenny never expected them to. She served customers with a gentle smile, soft eyes, and a quiet step, as if afraid of disturbing the air around them. But behind those gestures was an emptiness, one she couldn't quite trace the origin of and didn't know when it might end. One early morning in October, while sunlight had yet to pierce the thin veil of fog on the diner windows, Jenny saw the boy for the first time. He sat near the window, table number 9, the only one from which you could see the whole street through the misted glass. Small-framed, messy brown hair, and a black backpack that seemed far too large for his narrow shoulders. He placed a thick book in front of him, like a little fortress, and sat in silence, not ordering food, only asking for a glass of water. Jenny didn't ask questions. She simply brought the water, set it down gently on the table, and gave a slight nod. The boy responded with a look, no words, then lowered his gaze back to the page. He stayed until 8 a.m., then left as quietly as he had come. The next morning, he returned. Same table, same book, same order. And the morning after that. And the morning after that. Though he never spoke a word, the boy became part of the diner, like the ticking wall clock or the old jazz drifting through the speakers. But to Jenny, his presence wasn't just routine. It became something she started to notice. He arrived precisely at 7:15, unfailingly punctual. He sat neatly, never fidgeted, never disrupted. Only his eyes betrayed him, sometimes pausing on steaming plates of pancakes or tall glasses of chocolate milk ordered by other kids, then darting away quickly as if he wasn't allowed to want those things. Jenny began to wait for him. She'd watch the clock, and if the minute hand crept past 7:17 without his arrival, a quiet weight would settle in her chest. It wasn't exactly worry, more like something in her rhythm felt off when he wasn't there. On the 15th day, Jenny did something she couldn't fully explain. She stepped into the kitchen and told the cook there was an extra plate of pancakes. No one asked why. She placed the stack on a tray, added a drizzle of syrup, a small pat of melting butter on top, and walked over to table 9. The boy looked up as she set the plate down. "The kitchen made too much," she smiled. "Would be a shame to waste it. Go ahead, eat." He stared at the pancakes for a long moment, then looked at her, his eyes, as if trying to decipher whether this was a trick. Then he gave a slight nod, said nothing, and began to eat, quickly, almost hurriedly, still not taking his eyes off the page, as though if he looked up, the pancakes would vanish. Jenny didn't linger. She walked back to the counter, and when she returned a few minutes later to clear the table, the plate was empty. The boy looked up and murmured, "Thank you," for the first time. A word. It was such a small phrase, but it rang inside Jenny like a quiet bell. The next day, there were no extra pancakes, but there was a small sandwich Jenny accidentally delivered to the wrong table. "Kitchen mixed up the order," she explained, as if it were true. The boy lowered his head again, ate again, said nothing more. And so, the accidental breakfasts began to appear. No one noticed, or they assumed Jenny was simply forgetful. Only she knew it was the most intentional mistake she'd ever made. And perhaps the boy knew too, but he never asked. Jenny never asked his name either. She didn't need to. Sometimes, you don't need to know everything about someone to know they need to be cared for. One morning, as she poured his water, she caught the look in his eyes as he stared out the window. Eyes not just hungry for food, but for presence, for recognition, for a hug, or maybe just someone to ask, "How's your day today?" Jenny stood frozen for a moment. She remembered herself at 10 years old, sitting in the corner of the classroom, never invited to play, never asked how she felt. She hadn't hungered for food, but she had starved for the belief that she mattered. She walked back into the kitchen, poured an extra glass of milk. No one asked. She simply set it beside the pancakes that morning and gave her usual soft nod. At 8 o'clock, the boys stood up like always, gave Jenny a small bow, as if it were their unspoken ritual, then walked out. And Jenny was left standing beside the empty table, dishcloth in hand, heart aching with a feeling she couldn't name. She had never imagined that something so small could make her feel so much. The boy kept coming, day after day, and Jenny kept quietly placing plates of pancakes, sandwiches, or sometimes just a glass of milk at his table, as if it were some intentional mistake. No one spoke of it. She didn't ask, he didn't explain. But within that silence, a habit began to take shape, gentle and steady, like the pale rays of a winter morning. No one in the diner ever called the boy by name. The head chef only glanced over when a plate went missing from the counter without a receipt. Her coworker, Martha, would smirk and say, "Another mix-up, Jenny?" Her voice hovering somewhere between curiosity and suspicion. Jenny only smiled, a light enough smile to avoid more questions. Even the smallest routines, if repeated often enough, eventually draw attention. By the 4th week, the morning shift manager, Mr. Tucker, started to ask questions. "Jenny, have you been adding extra items that customers didn't order?" She paused, her hands still wiping a table. "Not exactly. It's just, sometimes the kitchen has leftovers. I hate to see food go to waste." Tucker frowned. "I know you're a thoughtful worker, but this is a restaurant, not a charity. Every pancake, every glass of milk, it all goes on the books." Jenny stayed silent. She didn't know how to make him understand that she wasn't trying to fill a gap in accounting, but a gap in a child's heart. Rumors traveled faster than she expected. Some regular customers began whispering, "Who is that kid anyway? Never orders food but stays there for so long." Martha, who wasn't a bad person, once pulled Jenny aside behind the counter, her tone concerned. "Jenny, I know your heart's in the right place, but in this town, people talk. Do you know what could happen if someone gets the wrong idea?" Jenny bit her lip. She knew. She was afraid too. But more than that, she feared the morning the boy might come in, and there'd be no place for him to sit, no glass of water, no one silently preparing his breakfast. Softly, she replied, "I just think, if I can help someone not start their day hungry, then I will, no matter how small it is." Martha looked at her for a long moment, then nodded quietly and walked away. But Jenny knew the line between kindness and suspicion in the eyes of others is sometimes cruelly thin. The following Tuesday morning, the boy didn't come. 7:15, no sign. 7:30, still nothing. Jenny glanced at the clock, glass of water in hand, eyes fixed on the door. Not a trace of that small figure. By 8, she stepped outside, standing under the awning, eyes scanning the fog-covered street. Nothing. It was the first morning, after 22 consecutive ones, without those shy glances from behind a book, without small trembling hands grasping a fork, without that whisper-soft, "Thank you." All day, Jenny felt hollow. The diner remained busy. Orders were placed, plates arrived full and left empty. But for her, it was as if something precious had vanished. The next morning, Jenny still prepared a plate of pancakes. She left it there, like a ritual, even though no one came. Then, the day after that, still no one at table 9. On the third day, she prepared nothing. But when she looked over and saw the empty table, it felt like something inside her had been crushed. Not because of the missing food, not even the absence, but because no one else in the diner, except her, seemed to notice that a small soul had once been there, had once needed to be cared for. On Friday morning, the boy came back. He walked in quietly, looking tired. His clothes were wrinkled, hair unkempt. Dark circles shadowed his eyes beneath thin lashes. He sat at the table, not looking around, just opened his book as always. But his hands, they were trembling. Jenny brought him his water. Her hands were shaking too. "Are you okay?" Her first direct question to him in nearly a month of silent exchanges. He didn't answer right away. He just looked at her, longer than usual, and then slowly shook his head. "I've been a little sick," he finally said, "but I didn't want to miss today." Jenny sat down across from him, forgetting she was supposed to stay standing. "Why not?" The boy paused, then quietly replied, "Because here, it smells like warm pancakes." That evening, Jenny was called into Tucker's office. On the desk was a printout of recent order records. "Jenny, these items aren't showing up on customer tickets, but they're gone every morning." She said nothing. "I don't want to fire you. You're one of the best we have, but you have to stop. If you keep secretly giving food away, I'll have to report it." Jenny nodded. No excuses. When she left the room, she felt like a criminal for giving a child something to eat. The next morning, she still arrived early, still poured the water, but no pancakes, no milk. The boy came in, sat down, quieter than ever. Jenny set the water down. He lowered his head, said nothing. She turned to walk away, then paused and gently said, "The manager said I can't bring food out anymore." The boy looked up and nodded. "I understand." His voice sounded older than his age. Jenny looked at him for a long moment. "But I'll still be here. Even without pancakes, you'll always have a place to sit, and someone who remembers you." The boy smiled, just a little. That day, table 9 wasn't empty, but there were no pancakes, no milk, no mistakes. Only 2 people, one big, one small, sharing something no one else in the diner could quite name: presence. In her quiet way, Jenny had chosen not to walk away, and the boy, by simply returning, had chosen to trust. And in that silence, they slowly began to change each other, one morning at a time. On Monday morning, the 23rd day since the boy first stepped into the diner, it rained. A light but persistent drizzle tapped steadily against the tin roof and glass windows of Rosie's diner. The place was quieter than usual, regular customers reluctant to crawl out of bed in the damp weather. Jenny stood behind a counter, polishing each glass until it shone, eyes fixed on the door, the spot where she had grown accustomed to seeing that familiar small figure every morning. And then he came. A silver-gray raincoat, the same oversized backpack slung over his thin shoulders, damp hair falling across his forehead. He didn't look at anyone, just walked briskly to table number 9, like every other morning. But this time, Jenny noticed something different. He wasn't carrying a book. A small detail, but enough to make her heart sink just a little. She brought out his water. No pancakes, no milk. But for the first time, as she placed the glass on the table, the boy looked up and spoke. "What's your name?" Jenny hesitated. His voice was quiet but steady, as if he had rehearsed that sentence for days. "I'm Jenny," she answered, offering a soft smile. He nodded. "I'm Adam." The name lingered in the air, making everything suddenly feel real. From a nameless figure, the boy now had a name, and with that name came an entire unseen world Jenny had never been invited into. "Adam, you didn't bring your book today," she asked gently, noticing how he kept glancing out the window. He shook his head. "I thought maybe today I should talk." Jenny sat across from him, something she rarely did. In the diner, everyone was always in motion, but in that moment, time seemed to slow. He began to speak, slowly, using simple words that ached with quiet sorrow. "My dad used to be in the Marines. Then he worked as a mechanic. My mom died when I was little, and this spring, my dad got called overseas again." Jenny said nothing. The boy had been without his father for months? "Dad promised to be back before Christmas, but then he sent a letter. He said he got hurt. Not badly, but he had to stay for treatment." Adam reached into his backpack and pulled out an old, faded envelope. On the front, in careful handwriting, it read, "To Adam, my little man." Jenny took it, hands trembling. The letter wasn't long, but each word was soaked in love. "Adam, if you're reading this, it means I'm not home yet, but don't worry, I'm okay. Every morning, I picture you sitting somewhere, reading, just like always, and I hope there's someone nearby, someone who'll notice you, someone who might ask if you've had breakfast." Jenny folded the letter, unable to speak. She looked at Adam, not a stranger anymore, but a child doing his best to live kindly in a busy, indifferent world. "Dad gave me the address of this place," Adam added. "He said he used to stop here, said the pancakes were the best in Kansas, said this was a place where people were still kind." Jenny didn't respond. Something inside her rose like a wave. It hadn't been coincidence. Adam came here for a reason, and she was just a small piece in a silent promise between a father and his son. That week, everything shifted. Jenny told the story to Martha, the first person she trusted. Martha was quiet at first, then nodded, eyes misty. "I'll keep it to myself," Martha said. "But maybe this diner needs more than meals. Maybe it needs a little understanding." 2 days later, Tucker, the manager who once warned Jenny, called her into his office. But this time, it wasn't to scold her. On his desk was a printed letter titled, "To Rosie's Diner from a Father." It was an email Tucker had received, the sender, Thomas Monroe, Adam's dad. "I don't know who has been helping my son each morning, but I know that person has kept his faith alive when I couldn't be there. A plate of pancakes, a glass of water, that's more than food. That's presence. That's love I couldn't mail in an envelope. I know the world is full of unfairness, but if there's someone like you, someone who feeds my son without asking for anything, then I can still believe I'll recover, come home, and say thank you in person." Tucker said nothing after reading. He simply slid the letter across the desk toward Jenny. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "Some things don't belong in the books." A few days later, on a cool Sunday morning, before the diner filled with customers, a man in military uniform stepped inside. He was tall, walked with a slight limp, a worn backpack slung over one shoulder. He paused at the doorway, scanning the room, until his gaze landed on table number 9. Adam looked up, eyes wide. "Dad!" he cried out, and ran toward the man. The entire diner froze. Jenny stood still, clutching her dishcloth, eyes locked on the scene before her, the father kneeling, wrapping his arms around his son, while Adam collapsed against his chest, sobbing openly. When they stood again, the man looked around, then walked over to Jenny. "You're Jenny?" She nodded. He bowed his head. No words, just a deep, quiet gesture. Enough for everyone in the room to understand. Something sacred had just taken place. "Thank you," he said, voice low and full of gratitude, "for the kindness you didn't even know was holding a little soul together." Jenny didn't respond, but something inside her quietly bloomed. Not pride, not recognition, just a silent acknowledgement that kindness doesn't need spotlights to shine. It only needs a small table, a plate of pancakes, and a pair of eyes willing to see. A week after that unforgettable morning, Rosie's Diner was no longer the same, not because of changes in the menu or decor, but because something intangible had shifted in the atmosphere. A gentle warmth began to permeate every corner of the diner. Regular patrons still occupied their usual seats. The tables remained in their familiar arrangement. Yet there was a softness in people's gazes, a bit more attention paid to those around them, a touch more patience when placing orders, a moment of reflection when glancing at table number 9, the spot where a quiet boy once sat each morning. Behind the counter, where menus and receipts used to be the only adornments, now hung a small wooden frame on the wall. Inside was a handwritten note in a child's scrawl. "Thank you, Miss Jenny. Thank you to this diner, a place where a child doesn't have to ask to be fed. Adam Monroe, 10 years old." Beneath the note rested a small coin, a military challenge coin, displayed with reverence behind the glass. Adam's father had left it before departing for further treatment. He explained that such coins are given by soldiers to those who have protected something precious in their absence. Jenny had wept upon receiving it. Not out of pride, but because she understood the coin wasn't solely for her. It symbolized everyone who chooses kindness, even when unnoticed. Manager Tucker, once skeptical, was the first to propose an idea. "We could add a small note to the menu," he suggested. Something like, "If anyone wants to, they can pay an extra $2 for an anonymous breakfast. We'll reserve those meals for anyone in need, no questions asked." Jenny nodded, eyes glistening. "Let's call it the Stranger's Breakfast." A small sign was placed near the counter. "If you'd like to gift a breakfast, please leave $2. If you need a breakfast, simply ask, 'Did someone leave one for me today?'" No paperwork, no verification, no explanations. And something remarkable happened. Within a month, the glass jar labeled Stranger's Breakfast was full every day. Townspeople, from newspaper vendors and school teachers to retired seniors, visited Rosie's Diner not just to eat, but to give. Jenny was no longer the waitress no one remembered. She became a gentle presence amidst the daily hustle, a symbol of quiet resilience. She still arrived early, poured water, and polished glasses, but now warm glances followed her as she moved through the diner. As for Adam, the once quiet boy, he no longer appeared every morning. He visited only on weekends, sometimes with his father, sometimes alone, to place a $2 bill into the glass jar before quietly leaving. Jenny always pretended not to notice, maintaining the silent ritual between them. But each time his hand touched the counter, she offered a gentle smile, wordless. One Sunday morning, Jenny received a letter. No sender's name. Inside was a small note, the handwriting clear. "Thank you for believing that small things matter. I will strive to grow into the person you believed I could be." Jenny folded the note and placed it into her old notebook. She didn't need confirmation of who wrote it. Some truths are felt without needing to be spoken. Years later, Rosie's Diner became the most renowned spot in town, not for its food, but for its spirit. Newspapers featured stories about it. Tourists stopped by. But what kept the place alive wasn't fame. It was the kindness passed from person to person, the belief in goodness. One early winter morning, as Jenny cleaned tables, she noticed a young girl sitting at table number 9. Long hair, a backpack, a somber expression. In front of her was a glass of water, no food ordered. Jenny approached, heart gently aching. She sat down and softly asked, "Would you like something to eat?" The girl shook her head. Jenny stood up, smiling. "Well, I seem to have brought out an extra plate of pancakes by mistake. It would be a shame to waste them." The girl's eyes lit up as she looked at the plate, and for the first time in many years, Jenny saw that familiar look, the hunger not just for food, but for understanding. She returned to the kitchen, wiping her hands. Her heart beat quietly but warmly. Life continued, people came and went, but kindness, when steadfast and silent, never disappears. It simply moves from one table to another, from one person to the next, like a small flame kept alive by those unnoticed yet making the most profound difference. You don't need to know someone's name to be kind to them. You don't need a reason to give, just enough care to notice what someone else might need. Jenny wasn't a hero. She was just a waitress with an old apron. But in a world where it's easy to look away, she chose to stay. And sometimes that's enough to change someone's entire world.